Okay, boys and girls, today we are working on, in this video, on tenths and hundredths and what that looks like. So let's say I gave you, well, let's review what we learned in the overview. So if I had 0.57, this would be the tenths place. This would be the hundredths place. Okay, so we're going to use this information in this video today as we solve some problems of changing fractions to decimals. So I want you to look at, or I want you to think about this. If I gave you $1, I want you to think, how many pennies are in that dollar? Take a second to think about it. You should find that you have 100 pennies and $1. So if I gave you 1 penny, you would have 1/100th of a dollar. Now I want you to think, how many dimes are in a dollar? Give you a second to think about it. There's 1 dime in a dollar. So that means if I gave you, oh sorry, not 1 dime, there's 10 dimes in a dollar. So if that means I gave you 1 dime, you would have 1/10 of a dollar because you have 1 of the 10 pieces that mean that you get to create a dollar. This is going to be helpful as I talk about fractions today. So if we look here, there are 100 pennies, or $1 in this. And I know that because there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 going down. And there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 going across. So I'm going to use this knowledge to help me write some fractions. If I were to start out, and I'm going to start looking at all the pennies. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 pennies colored in. Out of how many? You should all be saying 100. So I have 10 100ths. To write this as a decimal, because I already have it in a fraction, and remember decimals and fractions are the same thing. I put my decimal point and I put in my place values. I have the tenths place value and the hundredths place value. And all I need to do is write that, the number 10, write it above it in each place. So I fill it in. So in the end, that is the decimal, 0.10. Now let's look at it as if this was a fraction without the pennies in it. I have 1 colored in out of 10. I'm going to color these in so they look blank so you don't look at the pennies. I have 1 colored in of the 10 pieces. So that means I have 1/10 of it filled out. So since I'm only going to the 10th place, I only have to make a line for the 10th. And I put a 1 above it. So that means 1/10 is the same as 0.1 in fractions. And these are actually synonymous to each other too, because I could just cover up that 0 because there's nothing following after it, and they would be the same. But for this case, if I'm writing 10 hundredths, I want to keep that 0 there. So let's try another one. On this one, I have 10 pennies, 10 pennies. So that means I have 20 total pennies out of how many were there? 100. So I need to write that down. So I turn it into a decimal. I put my decimal point. I fill in my line for the tenths place. Remember, there's no 1th place. That doesn't make sense. So I have my 10th place and my 100th place. And I put the 20 on top. So this becomes 0.20. Now the same concept as before. I have, this time, 2 of my 10 pieces, and I'm filling these in just so you can realize that these are part of it too. Each one of those are the tenths. I have 2 tenths colored in. So I only draw a line for my tenths place because there's only a 10 right there. And I fill in the 2. So that means 0.2 is the same as 2 tenths. Okay, so for this one, I had hundredths, so I drew my 10 hundredths. This one I only had 10, so I just drew in the tenths place. Okay, try this one on a paper on your own. See what you get. Pause the video if you need to. Okay, I'm going to start looking at the hundredths first. So, I can see I have 10 pennies, 10 pennies, 10 pennies, 10 pennies, 10 pennies. So that means I have 50, if I added all those 10s up, I have 50 pennies out of the whole 100 pennies of $1. I need to change this to a decimal point. I would change it to, since it's hundredths, I need to put my tenths, hundredths place, so I have that, and then I write the 50 above it, making sure to put a digit in each place value. So that means my decimal is 0.50. Now if I were to do it looking at the, as if there were 10 pieces, where this is 1 tenth, 2 tenth, 3 tenth, 4 tenth, 5 tenths, and these are the missing sides, 6 tenths, 7 tenths, 8 tenths, 9 tenths, 10 tenths, okay? I have 5 of them filled in out of the 10 whole pieces. So that would be the same. Since it's tenths, I only need to put the tenths place. I don't need to put the hundredths because it only has me go to the tenths. I put the 5 above it, and it becomes 0.5. Okay? Look at this next one. It has this many color. So we have, if we're looking, we have 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pieces. So if we added all those up, it would be 75. Out of how many total pieces? 100. So I put that there. This will change into a decimal. Since it's the hundredths, I have to put tenths, hundredths, and then I write my 75 up above. And I can now turn that into 0.75, which is my fraction if I'm looking at it as hundredths. Now if I'm looking at it as tenths, let's see if we can do it. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.5? Can I do 7.5 tenths like this? No. So for this one, there is no way to write it in the tenths form. We would only write it in the hundredths form. because it doesn't make sense to put 7.5 tenths. That just doesn't make sense. You can have a decimal and a fraction. Or you couldn't do 7.5 tenths. That just doesn't look right. So we don't do it as tenths. We just keep it straight as hundredths. So let's practice a few together. I'm going to give you a fraction that either is in the tenths or hundredths, and I want you to make it into decimal form. So let's do 17 hundredths. Okay? I'm going to teach you some tricks with this now. Since it's in the hundredths, I do my decimal point, tenths, hundredths. And I can write 17, which then turns to 0.17. Another way to look at this is thinking I have 1, 2 zeros. If I have the number 17, there would be a decimal point after it. I need to move it this decimal point forward, meaning this way. I need to move it however many zeros there are. So I do 1, 2. So then that means this has now, it's not here anymore, it's now there, 0.17. Did we get the same answer? Yeah, so let's look at it and try it again. I'm going to give you the fraction 35 hundredths. Okay? So, check to see how many zeros there are. There's 2 zeros. Okay? Since there's 2 zeros, if I had the number 35 and I had my decimal point right here, I could move it by how many zeros there were. So I move it forward 1, 2. So then that means my new decimal would be 0.35. Let's check it this way to make sure. So since it's hundredths, I put my tenths, hundredths, and I make sure I have one digit on each of them. So that turns it to 0.35. Did we get the same answer? Yeah, we did. So let's try another one. You try this one on your own. Let's do 4 tenths. You can do it either way. I'm going to show you both. Pause the video and you try. When you're ready, turn it back on. So there's 1, 0. So that means I take my 4, the decimal point's always after the whole number, and I move it forward 1. It's not here anymore, it's now here. So that means my decimal is 0.4. Now let's check it the other way just to make sure. Since it's only in the tenths place, I only have to write the 10th number. I put the number or the digit on top, so that means it's 0.4. Are they the same? Yeah, they are. Okay, now I want you to watch. There's one more video, and then we'll get to practicing. Thanks, guys.